Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second Keep Whamaparoa's Green Spaces live stream. Just to make sure that the gremlins aren't with us, I'll just get somebody out in our online audience to type a question in on the text box, and just to make sure that everything is working. I'm going to assume that is the case. I'm Howard, and tonight I've got with me, as last time, Chris and Owen, and of course we're all on the executive of KWGS. The main purpose of this live stream tonight is to discuss the recent letter from Auckland Council and to place it in the context of our fight to retain Gulf Harbour Country Club's green space. The letter is very encouraging, but it is not, can I just repeat, it is not the end of the road at all. There is still a very large amount of things that need to be done. We'll discuss all of that in detail tonight, but before we get onto it, I'd like to thank a number of people who've been instrumental in getting us to where we are today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the overwhelming support from the local Gulf Harbour and Whamaparoa communities. Many of the people, and obviously you folk who are tuned in tonight, are among the over 1,600 supporters on our private Facebook page. You may also be members of one of the 450 registered members on our KWGS website. And of course, we've also got in the background the 4,500 who signed our original petition way back when the golf course closed. I'd also like to especially thank Auckland Council, our local councillors, Wayne Walker and John Watson, for their ongoing help, and also the local board members, especially the current chair, Alexis Popelbaum, Jake Law, Sam Mills, Julia Parfitt, and Greg Walden. I would also like to thank our local MP, Mark Mitchell, who's been very supportive of our efforts. We've also been the beneficiary of some very detailed reporting in the media in the last few months, and I'd like to acknowledge in particular Hibiscus Matters, Terry Moore and Patrick Goodenough, for their ongoing series of articles in the local paper. There's also been coverage from the New Zealand Herald, the National Business Review, Television One, News on the Web, the Rodney Times, Stuff, and the Hibiscus Coast app, plus of course TV1 and TV3 News. This media coverage has enabled our campaign to be amplified and reach a large number of people. You'll be interested to know that we've received messages of support from not only the local and wider Auckland regions, but from around New Zealand and indeed across the world. There is a very large audience following our fight to protect this much-loved green space and country club. As you probably already know, we've had a continuous dialogue with not only the political part of Auckland Council, but also its staff. There are a large number of staff that have been helpful in replying to queries of information, and that has made our job more effective. Although the letter to Long River came from Phil Wilson, the CEO, we know that other staff members would have provided input. The council communications clearly show how important community visibility is. As we move into the next phase of our campaign, your widespread active support remains our biggest asset. I'm going to mention some present and upcoming initiatives in my wrap-up, but at this stage, that's enough for me, and I'll pass over to Chris.
Thanks, Howard. So there's a number of things that I want to cover from a legal perspective. The first one is the council support for the 999-year encumbrance. The council's public support for the encumbrance is critical from a legal perspective. And the reason for that is that it reduces the options that the developer, Greg Oliver's company, Long River, has in terms of developing the golf course for housing. The council have now made it clear that they will not agree to removing or varying the encumbrance. And while we always thought it unlikely that the council would remove or vary the encumbrance, which specifies that the land is to be used solely as a golf course and country club, this letter has absolutely confirmed that in writing. And so we can't underestimate the importance from a legal perspective that that letter has had. So now I want to have a look and talk about the remaining options for Long River. The first one is the fast track legislation, which I think most people are familiar with, is now going through the select committee, and the report back on that is due in September of this year. Now, prior to the 24th of April, it was possible for interested parties to pre-submit applications for fast track approval. Under the Official Information Act, we requested details of any such applications, but the response from the applicable government department was that it was commercially sensitive and they would not provide that, which was a pity, but that's what their response was. So we can't say definitely whether or not an application has been made by Long River prior to the 24th of April cut-off date. However, whether or not an application was made is to some extent irrelevant, as once the legislation has passed, further applications can be made. So consequently, the key issue is whether an application by Long River, whether made before 24 April or subsequent, is likely to succeed. Our view is that it does not. Public statements by our local MP, Mark Mitchell, are strongly supportive of maintaining the land in its current zoning, and he is opposed to any redevelopment of the land for housing. So we're very pleased to receive Mark's very detailed support with respect to that. The existence of the encumbrance is in itself a further barrier to the land being zoned for housing, and we believe the current wording of the proposed legislation would not allow for that legislation to override the encumbrance. A second option for Long River is to make a unilateral application to the High Court, which they can do pursuant to the Property Law Act. We've researched the relevant legislation under the Property Law Act and all the case law with our legal team, and we can say pretty much 99 to 100% certainty that from a legal point of view, without council and community support, the chances of the High Court agreeing to remove the encumbrance based on a unilateral application by Long River is close to zero. Of course, a further option, this is the third option that Long River has, is that they could sit on the land for another 980 years and do nothing. Well, good luck with that. That commercially makes absolutely no sense. But also, aside from that commercial unreality, the encumbrance requires the land to be operated as a golf course, and currently Long River is in breach of that requirement. That means that the council could commence an action against Long River to maintain and operate the land as a golf course. And I think that is something that we will be wishing to pursue with the council, because in our view, just sitting on the land and doing nothing is legally in breach of the encumbrance. Third point I want to make is that, as most of you will be aware, the council went in and removed all the old burnt out clubhouse and pro shop, and the cost of that exceeded $200,000. The council have or will shortly be sending an invoice to Long River for that amount. That puts pressure on the first mortgagee, as Oliver does not appear to have the funds himself to fund that cost. You may recall that at a recent liquidation proceedings by another creditor for the relatively small amount of $20,000, that amount was ultimately paid at the very last minute by the first mortgagee. That's the US-based company. And that meant that Oliver presumably did not have the money to even fund $20,000, let alone the $200,000 that the council will be seeking. So if that invoice is not paid, then the council could then or has the right to commence a liquidation application in the High Court to liquidate Long River. And that again is certainly one of the things that we will be pursuing. The fourth point that I want to make is that Long River is almost certainly in breach of its current mortgages, and there are 3 of those, as we've talked about last time. It's likely that Long River has been accruing interest on the mortgage, and we can be almost certain, 100% certain, that that is the case. However, from a commercial perspective, it's likely that Long River is in breach of at least one of those 3 mortgages, if not all 3. KWGS intends to inform the 3 mortgage holders of the council's support for the encumbrance, and that letter will be going to them fairly shortly. Now, if the interest is not being paid, then obviously it's accruing. And again, referring back to that last liquidation application that was made, the barrister for Long River at that time indicated to the court that there was a total of $48 million that was owing. And that, given that the first mortgage was originally for 24 million odd, clearly indicates that the mortgage interest is accruing and is not being paid. Now, this puts the second mortgagee in a rather interesting position, because as the first mortgagee's accumulated interest continues to increase, then the chances of the second mortgagee ever recovering all or part of their loan decreases quite significantly. The problem the second mortgagee has is that we understand the mortgage as what is termed a contributory mortgage. And what that means is that it is made up of contributions by third parties, normally private investors. Assuming this is the case, and we're pretty confident that it is, it means that the funding for the mortgage did not come from the mortgage holder, or certainly not 100% from the mortgage holder. If the mortgage is in default, then the chances of recovering any of the debt as time goes on significantly reduces. Now, the second mortgagee has an obligation to advise investors of this fact, and those investors could reasonably expect the second mortgagee to appoint a receiver or a liquidator to protect the investor's position to the extent that is possible. If they do not, those investors may have an action against the second mortgagee. We understand the second mortgagee also has a first mortgage over one of Oliver's personal properties, which is a home in Auckland. But the value of that property is less than the amount likely to be owed under the golf course mortgage, to the tune of some $2 million odd. That house was recently advertised for sale. Obviously, much of what I've just said is speculation, but we think there is a strong likelihood that that is the correct position. Now, the next point I want to talk about, and this has been requested by people that are interested, what is the possibility of a class action or a series of class actions? Now, we've been investigating the legal actions that KWGS may be able to facilitate through legal class actions by property owners in Gulf Harbour and possibly further afield. The Council's decision to support the encumbrance and facilitate these potential actions is significant. Legal work is currently being undertaken with respect to these class actions, potential class actions, and preliminary research indicates that there is a strong basis for several of them. Now, it wouldn't be appropriate at this stage to comment on precisely what those are, but just rest assured that things are progressing and that we are not sitting idle. So that's the update of the legal issues as we see it at the moment. And in due course, I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come up during the session. Owen, I'll hand over to you now for your comments.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, as with the last live stream, a lot of it is legally focused, but I just want to talk about some other realities that affect the decisions around all of this and that we're working on. We recently put out the video, the Monopoly board video, and that was a good example of the sort of areas that we're delving into to point out the capacity constraints that we've got down this end of the peninsula. And that video talked about zoning already existing for another 1,400 dwellings in Gulf Harbour. And in that same vein, we're getting ourselves more fully informed on the impact of in particular, roading and also sewerage capacity that are big constraints to development. On the sewerage front, it's interesting, we're discovering that the Hibiscus Coast is just about at full capacity. And the timeframes for a solution are long and extremely expensive. There doesn't appear to be anything in the pipeline, to coin an unfortunate analogy, but we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're talking, 7 to 10 years time frame. We'll be discussing that particular subject in more detail in the future, but we've already had expert advice on that, and we'll be seeking more going forward. And with respect to traffic, over the last few years, we've constantly talked about the limitations of the one road in and one road out to the end of the peninsula. But we will be building on this by bringing in expertise to understand the underlying data and the sort of data that council uses in its planning and assessments. So we're getting ourselves credible data, insights into traffic implications of growth on the peninsula. I guess what I'm really saying here is at KWGS, we're a long, long way from sitting down to sort of see what happens following the positive news from council last week. We're on the front foot, and we're actively seeking to get a positive for the whole community long-term solution. From my point of view, the idea that anyone thinks houses can or should be built on the golf course land beggars belief. And we will stay in the fight for as long as it takes to ensure that never happens. I just like to pick up on what Howard was saying before and add my personal thanks to a huge number of supporters, particularly within council. Local board have been there right from the start. Our two local councillors, Wayne Walker, John Watson, right through the whole organisation have really stepped up. And of course, Mark Mitchell, our local MP, has stepped up as well. It's interesting, in recent months, KWGS has actually grown in strength. More people coming on board, directly supporting our cause and putting in hours and hours of work. One obvious or visible, although he's behind the scenes, is Duncan, who has launched the YouTube channel for us and doing an absolutely fantastic job. But we have also had a number of very influential people coming on board and behind the scenes, but these are people with significant reach in the financial world and in the political framework. So the point I'm really making here is we're in this for the long haul. We're growing from strength to strength, and we're just working hard for the day when the people behind Long River realise that there's only one solution, and that is a golf course. So I'll hand back to Howard now for a wrap up. Thank you.
Thanks, Owen, and thank you, Chris. I'm just going to mention some present and upcoming initiatives before finishing tonight's live stream. Firstly, I'd like to mention the local residents. We've got a couple of groups of local residents mowing fairways, and we've got interest from others as well. If you are interested in that, can I suggest that you have a look at the video about Jason and his supporters? If you haven't seen that already, it's really worthwhile watching. As Owen mentioned, the YouTube channel is gaining great following. Please remember to like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. You'll be interested to know that so far our videos have had 10,000 views by more than 5,000 individual viewers. When you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you get automatic alerts, notifications. We generally post on a Friday so that you've got the Friday evening and the weekend to sit down and look at our material. And we normally post every 2 weeks or so. You might be interested to know that there's between 25 and 35 hours of effort goes into each video. But we're putting these videos out because we think it's very important that you, our supportive community, get this clear, concise information as soon as we are in receipt of it so that you can understand how the fight is going. The other value of the YouTube subscription is that it lifts our KWGS profile by making it easier to find. You can share links to the videos to friends and families and supporters. It's a very cheap way of getting our messaging beyond the peninsula to the wider Auckland populace and beyond. And of course, what happens here in Gulf Harbour with the golf course and country club has the potential to have a national impact. As we said in our letter last week, Gulf Harbour Country Club and golf course is right on Auckland's doorstep. It's important and is I described it as a jewel in the crown in the recreation area in the country. We are going to be holding a public meeting in August, early to mid-August. We're just finalising the details, and be assured you will have plenty of advance warning of that meeting so that you're able to attend. We will be making the material that we will deliver on that evening available on our website or through social media ahead of the evening so that you'll be able to take that material with you to the meeting. And so it'll be easier to understand when we go through it. We're also looking at some potential fundraising opportunities. We must keep fundraising because we still believe that we may face court action in the future, and fundraising is absolutely vital. You will start to see these KWGS stickers appearing in businesses up and down the peninsula in the near future, reminding everyone of our KWGS organisation and linking to the YouTube channel. If there are any businesses out there who would be willing to put a sticker in their window, please get in touch with us via social media and we will follow up. I'm just going to now have a look at a couple of questions that have appeared in the last 2 or 3 minutes and see what we can get some answers for you. Some of the other questions that came in earlier, we've woven them into what people have said, both Chris and Owen tonight. So here's the first one from Lisa. What is the off-ramp for Greg Oliver? How would a new golf course happen? Perhaps I could pass that to you, Chris.
Thanks, Howard. So if you look at the legal setup that we've got at the moment, there are really 2 parties, possibly 3, but 2 parties that could do anything. The first party, of course, is Oliver and his mortgagees. They could, in theory, reverse course and say, right, yes, we've listened to what everybody has said, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get the golf course up and running again. Unlikely, but possible. The second one is that ultimately Long River is placed in liquidation, and that allows an opportunity for a third party, and many have expressed an interest so far, to come in and acquire the land through a mortgagee sale and carry on or revitalise it as a golf course. And that would mean, of course, that Oliver and the existing mortgagees are out of it. And so that would be how it could be structured. There's a third option, I guess, and that is that council could be a potential purchaser. I think probably unlikely, but there's a possibility. But in any event, one way or the other, in terms of the legal position, it may take another year or two, hopefully less, but something will happen to that golf course. It will not sit vacant for the next 980 years. That is the only certainty in it. So I hope that answers that question.
Thanks, Chris. Here's a question from David, and I can answer this one. Comment on people living on the premises in caravans. The police have been involved, and also the council have been involved. The people who are living there claim that they have permission from the owners. We are going to let the police and the council work with them, and hopefully we can get that resolved. You'll note that in the council's letter, they mentioned the Freedom Campers on the site and the responsibility of the owner towards those Freedom Campers. So we would like to think that the police and council will be able to resolve that by working together. I'm going to hand this one to Chris. This is from Peter. What's the current approach in supporting ex-Gulf Harbour Country Club members in claiming their debts owing from the ownership?
So we've been working with those people who are interested in recovering their debts, firstly by way of assisting in their applications to the Disputes Tribunal, and they have universally been successful in terms of getting a tribunal order requiring repayment by GHCC 2016. The next step will be in terms of enforcing those orders, and we are working with those people that have received the tribunal's favourable decision to ensure that happens. So work is underway with respect to that. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, but rest assured that that process is underway.
Okay, thank you, Chris. There's just one other comment from Sue about leaving the public meeting until after the Olympics are completed. Yes, Sue, we have taken that into consideration as well. So, but thank you for that. Okay, that is the end of the questions. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to join us tonight. The council letter is a fantastic affirmation and a wonderful step forward, but there is still much work to be done in this campaign to save the green space. Haere rā and good evening from KWGS.